Alright, welcome to your Exponents review. We'll begin by talking about the parts of numbers that contain exponents. The two parts will be called your base and your exponent. Real quick, we'll identify the bases of each of these numbers. So in this particular case, the base is 2. You have to be careful in this one. You'll notice that there are two bases here because there is no parentheses. That means that you have 2 as a base and x as a base. Notice how that changes when we get here. But we still have two bases. We have -1 and 2x. Now this is going to be very significant because the exponent on the number 2 is a 1. And it's important that you always write that in and never forget about it. Alright, one more slight change here. Our base now comes together and we have a single base, -2x. Over the next 5 days, you'll be using these properties of exponents to simplify. Tomorrow in class, we're going to complete a foldable which will detail all of the properties of each one of these exponents. I'm going to go ahead and do the notes now, and then if you have any questions about any of your properties, be ready to ask those questions tomorrow. Okay, when we're dealing with negative exponents, any exponent, never mind the base, any exponent that is negative will move to the bottom of the fraction. Or if it's already in the bottom of the fraction, we'll move to the top. So what I do in this instance to simplify is I simply rewrite, or I simply start with a fraction bar, and then I write each value, each base and exponent on the top or the bottom of it based on whether it's negative or positive. So that means that this is going to be 1 over -5 squared. And -5 squared is a number, not a variable, so it can be simplified to positive 25. Now it's going to get more complicated. We're just going to start with simple one-step procedures. Again, draw your fraction bar. Identify your base and your exponent. If it's negative, it moves downstairs. If there is no number left up top after you've moved all of your numbers, that number that's left over is always 1. The other thing that I want to incorporate here is the power to a power property. Power to a power property. So what you're going to do here is you're going to multiply the number 2 to each one of the exponents on the inside of the parentheses. And that's going to be a 1 and a 1 respectively. So that's going to be 1 over 25a squared. Here you'll notice the parentheses have been removed, so now we've got to treat each separately. So the base that has the negative number on it is only a. So that means that the 5 remains on top while the a squared is moved to the bottom. So you want to treat each number as an individual unless, of course, it's separated by parentheses. It'll make more sense when we get into the more complicated problems later on this week. Alright, so again, the power to a power property says I'm going to distribute to each one of the exponents. Remember, if the exponent is not written, it is always assumed to be 1. So that's going to be 2 to the -2 power divided by 3 to the -2 power. Both of those numbers have negative exponents on them, so the 3 becomes positive. 3 squared becomes positive when you move it to the top, and the 2 squared becomes positive when you move it to the bottom. Again, they're numbers and not variables, so you simplify them as much as possible. Notice here there are no exponents on the outside of the parentheses, so we are multiplying these two together. We're going to start by multiplying the numbers. That gives us -12. And the property here says that if I multiply two numbers together that have the same base, I will add their exponents. And that means I will have 9 total z's. Again, that'll make sense tomorrow when we do our foldable. Alright, please remember to write in your exponents so that you know you've distributed to all of them. And that's going to give you y to the 3rd, z to the 9th divided by z to the 15th. The next property, the quotient property, says that I can subtract these two z's from each other, and I always do 15 minus 9, the larger minus the smaller, and that gives me the number 6. But because there were more z's on the bottom, once I've done the subtraction, I leave the z on the bottom of the fraction. Y to the third divided by z to the 6th. Here, remember, you've got to write in your ones on the 2 and the b so that you've known that you've distributed to all three appropriately. Negative 2 to the negative 3 power, a to the negative 9 power, b to the negative 3 power. I draw my fraction bar and I identify each individual base and its exponent, moving all negative exponents to the bottom and leaving all positive ones on top. So notice I do negative 2 to the third, a to the 9th, b to the third, and I simplify my numbers. 1 over, remember it's going to remain negative, negative 8, a to the 9th, b to the third. Alright, last three problems. Please note that you will only be distributing to the values inside the parentheses that the exponent is touching. It stops distributing here. So I'm going to start by rewriting 3x squared y. Now remember, there's a 1 on the 5, so it's going to be 5 squared, distribute, 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 x to the 8th because you multiply it together, and y to the negative 6. I have a negative exponent, so I'm going to go ahead and draw my fraction bar, treat each as an individual value, and move each individual base and exponent based on whether or not the exponent is negative or positive. 3 is positive, so it stays 3. X squared and y positive. 5 squared is 25. Simplify your numbers. X to the 8th divided by y to the 6th power. Now what I'm going to do is multiply 3 times 25. Simplify your numbers as much as possible. 75, add your x's because I'm multiplying them together, the product power, the product property, and that gives me 10 x's. Subtract your y's, that is 6 minus 1, which is 5. There are more y's on the bottom, so the resulting answer is still on the bottom of the fraction. Alright, number 13 and number 14, the trickiest problems on the page. So the multiplication property, product property, tells me that I'm going to add these two exponents together because their bases are the same. So I'll start by rewriting it as 3 to the 6 over 5 plus negative 5 over 3 power. I'll continue by finding a common denominator, multiplying this one to that one and this one to that one. So that's going to give me a total of 18 minus 25 over 15 in my exponent, and the base is still 3. 18 minus 25 is negative 7, so my fractional exponent is 7/15. Again, I will draw my fraction bar and I will move each base and exponent based on whether it's negative or positive. So that's 7/15 as an exponent on the bottom. Okay, we'll start with the inside parentheses here, and we will go ahead and rewrite this as a to the 3 over 18th power, and remember that's going to be raised to the negative 12th power. I'm going to reduce that to 1/6, so that's going to give me a to the negative 12 over 6 power. So I've multiplied these two together. I'll draw my fraction bar, and because it's a negative exponent, I will move it to the bottom, and there's my final answer. In the foldable notes tomorrow, you will understand how I did each one of these properties, but please still come prepared with questions if you are unsure about how I got my answers.